Hello viewers, we meet today on a remarkable day in Indian diplomacy and in India-Russia bilateral relations. President Vladimir Putin arrives in New Delhi today to begin a highly anticipated state visit, the first since 2022 and arguably one of the most closely watched engagements in our foreign policy calendar. This visit comes at a moment of profound geopolitical flux. Only days ago, senior envoys from Trump administration were in Moscow exploring possible contours of a new US-Russia understanding on Ukraine. Simultaneously, in Delhi, we've had the French, German, and British envoys publish an extraordinary joint op-ed in the Times of India, urging New Delhi to distance itself from Moscow. An intervention immediately countered by the Russian ambassador's sharply worded rebuttal in the same newspaper this morning. These diplomatic signals tell us that the world is acutely attentive to India's choices today. Against this backdrop, President Putin's visit carries weight far beyond the bilateral sphere. For India and Russia, it's an opportunity to consolidate a partnership that has shown exceptional resilience. India-Russia ties have withstood war, sanctions, global realignments, and shifting geopolitical currents, rooted in strategic trust, technological depth, and a shared belief in multipolar world. The relationship remains robust in defense, energy, nuclear cooperation, pharmaceuticals, and science and technology, with new opportunities emerging in the Arctic, artificial intelligence, quantum tech, logistics corridors, and rupee-ruble financial frameworks. Equally important is the personal chemistry between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin. They have met 16 times since last few years and 5 times this year alone, building an unusual degree of comfort and strategic coherence between two leaderships, something that has helped steady the relationship through periods of global turbulence. How will the world view this visit? What new possibilities does it open for India? And how should New Delhi navigate the competing pressures from Washington, Europe, and Moscow at a time when the global order is being renegotiated? To unpack these questions, I am privileged to have with me India's leading strategic thinkers, Dr. Arvind Gupta, former Deputy National Security Advisor and currently the Director, Vivekananda International Foundation. Dr. Gupta, welcome. President Putin arrives today at a time when global geopolitics is unusually fluid. How significant is this visit for India, especially given the competing diplomatic maneuvers we are seeing internationally? Also, I would like you to tell me that the relationship has endured despite, as I mentioned, sanctions and global realignments. And what does the chemistry between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi also, does it play a part in that?
Thank you, Anurag, for that opening statement of yours. I think it has the answers to the questions that you asked. The weather in Delhi is very nice these days, and though there's a little bit of pollution, but I think President Putin will enjoy his one of those rare forays outside the country. He has been busy with that war, except for China. I think he has not visited any other country, maybe one or two others. So he was looking forward to this visit to India, as Prime Minister had told Putin that 140 crore people of India are waiting for this visit. And you mentioned the articles by some of the diplomats, and they're fighting their contestations on the Indian soil. That shows how important the visit is.
Yes.
India and Russia are today, you mentioned, we have never had really any serious problems amongst ourselves, and the relationship has evolved. And I think after the Russia-Ukraine war started, India handled, Prime Minister Modi handled the situation extremely well, and the Russians are appreciative of India's stand. And I think India's stand was also appreciated by the world over, that there should be a diplomatic solution. India has welcomed the Russia-US parleys which are going on right now, and the peace plan which Trump has proposed, and that is being discussed by the US with Ukraine and with Europeans and with Russia. And for the first time now, there is a hope that there could be a possibility of this conflict coming to an end. And if that happens, that will be a plus for the whole world, but it will be also very good for India. because we have been a kind of a collateral damage to this war, particularly the U.S. sanctions on India purchases of Russian oil and so on and so forth. So this visit takes place amidst that very important background, and I'm sure there will be discussion between India and Russia during Putin's visit about the situation around Russia-Ukraine conflict. And India would support any diplomatic settlement of this issue. On the bilateral front, there are fresh opportunities to be taken. I think our bilateral relationship has generally been centered around defense and energy cooperation.
Yeah.
But now there are far greater opportunities which have opened up. And though there are secondary sanctions on Indian companies and so on, but I think there are ways to deal with these issues. But the short point is that the bilateral relationship can also look up, particularly in the area of technology, new connectivity routes, etc. Some of these have already been discussed, and there has been a discussion between the Indian and Russian officials in this year itself. And our External Affairs Minister was also there a few months ago. So things are looking up.
So I spoke about it, and then you said that they're fighting the battles on the Indian soil. So this is about the unusual joint coordinated op-ed which the French, German, the British envoys published in Times of India, followed by a equally strong rebuttal by the Russian ambassadors. What does this European pressure campaign tell us about how closely the West is watching the visits? That is the first part. And the second part is that President Putin is, this time of the visit, it is deeply symbolic. What is the message that Russia is sending to Moscow, to Washington, to Beijing, and to the wider world?
So first, that it was a highly unusual for diplomats of Western countries to come together and write an op-ed. This is very rarely this is done, and particularly at a time of a very important visit. I hope it doesn't cast a shadow on that visit, but I'm sure we'll be able to live with it. But this shows that the Europeans, who have earlier not been happy with India's stance, but they have lived with it. But this is perhaps the end game which has begun now in Russia-Ukraine war, and they might be trying to indicate or influence India's views. But also, perhaps it also indicates some kind of a desperation with the ongoing war, because Russia has made some gains on the territorial side, and the end game, they want to now retrieve as much as possible, perhaps. That is why they are doing this. But, sorry, the second part was your question?
What is the signal that Russia is sending to Washington and Beijing and the wider world?
So Russia, as you see, if you the last few years, one thing Russians, I think, seem to be saying is that they seem to hold an upper hand in this war. So, and they will reinforce this by coming to India and talking with Prime Minister Putin. The second signal I think they are also sending is that today Russia and India are for multipolarity, a multipolar world. So I think that message of multipolarity, which India, Russia, China, and also organizations like BRICS have been sending quite strongly. Russia has been talking about the world majority. India has been talking about global south. So this message that there is an alternative world order that is shaping up, in which global south will be very important, where there is a multipolar world that is arising, in which other countries, other than the West, today are playing a very important role. So I think it will strengthen the multipolarity. And the third signal, I think, which is being sent, is that there is enough scope for India and Russia collaboration to develop further. Yes, there is this sanctions on oil, etc. So that is one part of the total relationship. And I think perhaps there would be signals about fresh avenues of cooperation, particularly in the high technology area.
Right, so we'll come to that. Coming now to the bilateral relationships. Some of India's priority items include energy security, discounted crude, defense co-production, S-400 follow-ons, Sukhoi 57, and the lease of the second Akula class submarines. What movement can we realistically expect on these fronts during the visits? Also, sir, defense has been the backbone of this partnership. Do you see the visit accelerating joint R&D production and co-production, especially given sanctions on the Russian military-industrial complex?
So you are right. Defense cooperation has been the backbone of this relationship. But I think this visit will probably look beyond that. India has been diversifying its defense procurements over the years. Russians know about it, and they don't seem to mind it. But India is also looking for its Make in India program for foreign collaborations. So we have had a very successful joint venture with Russia over the last several decades, at least more than 2 decades, on BrahMos.
Yes.
So one possibility could be in these areas that you mentioned, whether joint production could be possible. So maybe some of these areas might be progress. Energy security remains very important. We have a Kudankulam program. 6 units are to be made. 2 are already functioning. And the third one, probably another year or so, or less than that, will be made functional. 4th one is under construction. 5th, 6th also, there are plans. But Russians may also be looking for fresh agreements for some more plants, etc. We'll have to see. Today, Russia also has possibilities in the small nuclear reactors.
Yes.
There could be some discussions on that as well. Apart from that, there could be discussions on critical materials, critical minerals, and also, Russia is very rich in oil and gas. There are resources in the Arctic, there are resources in the Far East. These ideas have been discussed earlier, but not progressed very much. We'll have to wait and see whether some progress can be made in these areas.
So you mentioned about energy security. India's trade deficit with Russia has ballooned to, I think, $64 billion. What realistic pathways exist to rebalance trade? Pharmaceuticals, IT, goods and services, engineering goods? And also, could Russia and India move towards securing long-term LNG contracts like Russia has had with China? Sir? So some comments on that, sir. What do you feel?
So, you see, sanctions are a reality, and the companies will go where their profits or their business interests take them. So we should be realistic that there could be maybe some decline in the purchases of Russian oil by our companies. But that doesn't mean that the opportunities are not there. You just mentioned LNG. I think that's a great opportunity. We are short of LNG. We want LNG. And if we operationalize our Eastern Maritime Corridor from Chennai to Vladivostok, that is a possibility. Let's not forget that Sakhalin field where we have invested more than 20 years ago is one of our most successful investments in the oil sector. So this opportunity can certainly be explored. But the point I'm trying to make is that non-oil trade may be low, but the opportunities today are huge. So this the total trade is about, non-oil trade is about, I think, 9 or 10 billions. But in the areas of pharmaceuticals or engineering, etc., we can have a new look at it. The question is, how do we deal with the sanctions? Now, the whole world is dealing with the sanctions these days. So I'm sure there are innovative ways of dealing with sanctions. But once the trade will not increase unless there are investments. So I think we need to follow an investment-led approach. Indian investments in Russia and Russian investments in India, and that will lead to trade. And we could be project-oriented, and this should align to our national priorities.
So, there are ambitious possibilities, as you mentioned, sir. Artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, quantum research, green hydrogen, semiconductor collaboration. Which of these do you see as the most feasible outcomes of the summit? And also, the Russians are very, very upbeat about the Northern Sea route, sir. And on both ends of the Northern Sea route, we have the INSTC on the western edge and the Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor on the eastern side, sir. Could India emerge as a central node in Russia's reoriented supply chains, their move to Asia, sir? So,
Absolutely. So that's what I'm saying, that today we should look at India-Russia relations beyond the traditional prisms of defense and energy, the way we have done it. Once we take these opportunities into account on board, then I think there will be possibilities. So all these areas that you mentioned, energy, whether it is green hydrogen or whether it's critical areas like semiconductors.
yes,
I understand that Russians today have semiconductor equipment and machines. It's not that they're totally. Then there are many very top-rated Russian institutions, and we met some of them recently in our meetings, who have they cover practically the entire spectrum of high-tech industrial production. And one thing we have to understand: today Russia has the technologies, but not the markets. So Russian technologies, and today India is also technologically a capable country. So this could be a relationship amongst equals. So Russian technologies, Indian market, and for global production. So even if we cannot use it, you can go for global. There is, for instance, now a Russian company has got a very big contract in India to manufacture the railway coaches for fast trains. Russia has done substantial progress in railways and equipment, etc. This can, if you bring the whole supply chain into this, starting from R&D to global exports, then I think these are possible. So pharmaceuticals is a very important area. Even today, Russia manufactures something like 30% of its needs for API. We, our API chain has kind of diminished, but there is a possibility there. Russians also have opportunities today in what you call the carbon fiber, which is a material which is needed in defense applications and in so many civilian applications also. So today we need not look at just products. We can look at technologies, intermediate technologies, and advanced materials. They are also quite advanced in quantum technologies. They are very advanced in cyber security, and these don't require even long, supply routes, etc. A lot of this can be done online and so on. So I think it is possible to explore this.
So, sir, I asked you about the $65 billion, close to $65 billion trade deficit, sir. Now, clearly, it means that Russia has to really invest or buy from India, sir. And there are several impediments. Language is one, sir. In your opinion, what do you feel that how can we overcome these? And Russia, it is not that Russia is not keen to buy. You yourself had mentioned earlier that in Valdai Club address, President Putin had said that he has directed his officials to increase trade with Russia, sir. What do you see as impediments to enhancement of Russian investment and market access to India, sir? And what are the practical steps to overcome those impediments?
I think the first impediment that I see is relative lack of knowledge about each other's market. We are going mostly by cliches. So I think there should be greater contact between the Indian and Russian institutions, businessmen, technology institutions, educational institutions, more people-to-people contacts. And now we have about 60,000 Indians who are working in Russia, which is all-time high. There is a large number of Indians who are going. So this will help us know each other better. That is one. Secondly, I think our top institutions should shed their inhibitions and actually come together in terms of science and technology cooperation. Not that we don't have a science and technology cooperation. We have a long-standing, very old program. But we did not bring in on board the industrial aspect, the last chain of that. Innovation is fine, but how do you commercialize it? So I think a new look is required, and we must set up appropriate institutions, whether technology forums or business forums, etc., with a view to look for commercial opportunities. But starting from the whole, from education, innovation, research, and to commercialization, etc. So this will require, I think, a new approach in which private sector and other non-government institutions need to come in. But at the same time, there has to be a very strong government support. then I think we need to expand the government-to-government collaboration and bring in some new, fresh projects. And there are many projects that can be done, because this will give confidence to the private sector that there is the governments are with them and they can go ahead. We talked about just recently, the government has announced a new PLI for magnets, permanent magnets. Now, we heard during our conversations with some Russian side that they do have some capabilities in the permanent magnets, etc. But the commercial side is missing. So maybe we can talk about this, and that will help us reduce our dependence on imports of these magnets from there. So I think it's just a fresh look that is required. And of course, the major impediment has been the payments and the sanctions. But there we will have to, look at new ways of doing settlements. It could be through third countries. It could be through maybe perhaps some digital products. It could be our linking up the Russian systems and the UPI systems, making specialized products for our tourists, because tourism can be a very big, trigger for India-Russia relations. Specialized products for Russian and Indian tourists, like the tourist cards, etc., where you can exchange. So there are very ways of doing it. And Russians have a lot of money today because they have accumulated a lot of money. They can invest here. But I think Indians should also think in terms of investing in Russia. Then we should also look at the opportunities which are arising in Central Asia, Russia, India. And now you have the Caucasus also opening up. There is a middle corridor which is coming up in the Caucasus after the settlement of Azerbaijan and Armenia war. And the Russians are also looking at those possibilities. And we can perhaps take help from them. Even Russia, Turkey and India is also a possibility. So I think dealing, in our own dealings, the importance of Eurasia, we should look at Russia in the backdrop of Eurasia, and I think fresh opportunities.
Sir, you mentioned about people-to-people ties and also increase of tourism. So there is, lately, I mean, we have talked about this in the earlier podcast as well, about civilizational ties and states pitching themselves as civilizational states. India's Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam narrative, and so is Russia pushing itself as a narrative of a civilizational state. Do you see that there are greater possibilities of greater linkages on civilizational links? I mean, at one time, Soviet Union, the Indian movies and culture was extremely popular in Soviet Union, but after the end of Cold War, this all actually dropped. Do you see that there is a greater scope for civilizational connect between the two countries, sir?
So we look at it at two levels. One is the level of economy of culture, where you talk about films, you talk about tourism, and that's really for us, because there are many opportunities, and that's very, very important part of it, because if there is money in it, then the tourism, etc.,
Yeah.
which requires, of course, the whole ecosystem to develop. But I don't see why this cannot be developed. You remember, we had a delegation from Northern Forum here, and tourism to the Far East and to Siberia and to Arctic, etc., was discussed. And they are offering fantastic opportunities. If we, sort out the visas and the payments and the flights and infrastructure, I think this can be done. Films, etc., can happen. And Russia has a very rich culture, so have we. And Russians like Indian culture, Indian cuisine, and Indians like Russians generally. And now more of our people are going there, students and workers, etc. So this can certainly work out. But there is a other aspect to culture, which is trying to understand the mindset. Today, Russia is projecting itself as a civilizational state. Now, what does that mean? They are trying to say that, look, we are not just that Western civilization. We are an independent civilization. We had some common roots, but we separated long time ago. The Russian Orthodox Church, which is really the backbone of Russia's culture, is different from the standard Westernization Catholic kind of a thing. There was a split that took place 1,000 years ago. So they are trying to project themselves as a independent civilization. And they also see Russia-Ukraine war in civilizational terms. They see Russia's relationship with West as a civilizational terms. So there is this great emphasis on Eurasianism. Russia also has Buddhism. And there was contacts, as you know, between India and Russia on the trade side going back to the 14th, 15th century. And there was a great deal of attraction in Russia for India's, for Sanskrit and India's Vedas and so on. Now, these during Soviet times, there used to be some discussions and so on, but that has more or less disappeared.
Yes.
So this will help us in understanding each other better and also understanding each other's mindset. The important point here is Russian Orthodox Church does not believe in conversion, which is very different from the novel. So this is a natural attraction for India. So I think we should understand these better, and certainly, and the effort here is not that the civilization should clash, but how civilizational approaches can help bring build bridges in the world and bring stability and peace. So that should be the approach we should adopt.
Right, sir. Now, moving on to how the world sees this visit. How do you expect Washington to read this visit? Especially since India has also deepened ties with United States through Quad, tech partnerships, and defense platforms. And also, apart from Washington, how will Beijing look at this meeting? Does closer India-Russia cooperation complicate or complement China's own relationship with Moscow? So I want you to tell me how Washington will see it and how Beijing will see this, interpret this visit.
So I think, as you know, Trump was very unhappy. We bought the Russian oil, etc., and they imposed sanctions, 25% extra sanctions. And we are dealing with the US in terms of our own, the trade agreement with them, etc. And the hopes are that at some stage these sanctions probably will go away. Much will depend upon how Russia-US relationship proceeds. I see that if there is some progress in the settlement of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which will bring a thaw between Russia and the US. And the Anchorage meeting was very positive. Both sides gave a very positive assessment of that. So we should welcome that. And India has welcomed that. So I think we should go a little beyond and not just see in terms of just of tariffs. So in the backdrop of this geopolitical churn that is taking place, let's not judge the India-US relationship in terms of just one action, which is the tariff 25%, and nor the India-Russia relationship in the backdrop of the US only, because as we discussed, there are many other opportunities opening up. So I will take a more balanced view of this. And I think though there is a very strong lobby in the US, which does not like India-Russia relationship. That's how the sanctions, etc., came. But things could change. So I'll take a reasonably optimistic view of it. So US may not totally be opposed to this visit. Let's see what comes out of it. So I take a positive view of this. Similarly, on the China thing, I think you recall when the Kazan summit happened. It was China, Xi and Modi met there on a Russian soil, and that is when the thaw started. And also, Prime Minister went to Tianjin for the SEO summit, and there was a very photograph of the three leaders, which sent shockwaves. So China may not, China may welcome this India-Russia, improvement of relations.
There were also talks of Russia-India-China trilateral at that time.
They have, even now they're talking. In fact, there may be some discussion in this meeting also, because Russia wants the India-China-Russia thing should be resumed. There is some reservation from the Indian side because of the state of India-China relations. But on the whole, I think China would be quite happy with this visit.
Sir, Prime Minister Modi and Putin, as I mentioned, have met several times, especially 5 times they have met this year. Sir. How does this personal rapport influence the steadiness of the partnership, especially when the global, system is clearly collapsing or it's in a violent churn? Is the Modi-Putin equation becoming an anchor of stability in an otherwise fractured geopolitical landscape?
I think this personal chemistry is playing a very important role in India-Russia relations. Prime Minister Modi could speak to President Putin after the war that this should not be an era of war. and that too publicly. So that can only happen if there is a good chemistry. And Putin liked it. So, and similarly, President Putin has appreciated Prime Minister Modi several times, and they talk on the phone, they exchange messages on their birthdays, etc., etc. So this chemistry is very important. And today, both India and Russia are very important players in the BRICS, in SCO, and as I said, Russia wants the RIC also to come up. So that is how they see that Russia and India can play that positive role and both sides can be an anchor of stability.
Sir, what are the biggest opportunities for India emerging from this visit, strategically, economically, and technologically? And conversely, what are the risks that India must manage? Sanctions exposure, over-dependence, or being caught in a great power rivalry?
So I think the relationship is so huge, so big, and that has developed so much. Everybody will have their own take on this as to what to expect from this visit. But I want to look at this visit essentially from and as an opportunity to further diversify our relations and a cooperation with Russia helping us build our Make in India program, build our technologies, and also emerge as a source of more trade and business so that we are able to diversify. Because today for India, it is very important to diversify. And Russia is almost an untapped market for us. And similarly, Russians are also looking at this visit to, because they are also looking for economic gains out of this. So I think economy and technology are going to be, for me, the measures of the success of this visit. Insofar as the strategic aspects are concerned, yes, energy and defense are very important, and I think we already have a good partnership. This will be deepened further. But whether we can open up some new areas, and that I think is remains to be seen. But overall, a strengthening and deepening of India-Russia cooperation is going to be beneficial strategically, both for Russia and for India. Russia also wants to see, apart from China, with which it has now a close, also another, alternative where you can come up with the same level as that of China. They will welcome that. For them also, diversification is very important.
Sir, the final question: if you had to summarize this visit, what it means for India's strategic autonomy, what would it be, sir?
I think it strengthens our strategic autonomy. Strategic autonomy will be strengthened by any diversification. Diversification in terms of our political context, economic context, technological context. So, and if the visit also helps us in develop in some strategic areas like defense and technology, certainly our strategic autonomy will also be strengthened.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for an exceptional and timely discussion. On a day when President Putin arrives in Delhi and the world is watching India's diplomatic choices with unusual intensity, your insights have helped illuminate both the opportunities and complexities ahead. We explored the global maneuvering around the visit, from European pressure and US-Russia signals to the Russian ambassador's rebuttal today, and the broader strategic context in which India must operate. What emerges clearly is that India-Russia relations remain rooted in long-term strategic trust, technological depth, and a shared vision of multipolar world, even as both nations adapt to new geopolitical realities. Above all, this visit underscores India's determination to pursue an independent foreign policy aligned to its own national interests, whether in energy security, defense innovation, connectivity, or emerging technologies. Thank you, viewers, for joining us on this special edition of Library Chat. Stay tuned as we continue to track the outcomes of this important visit and its impact on India's strategic horizon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.